I'm starting it. A Unheard Voices, the crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women in California. Imagine one of the most important people in your life, your mom, your sister, your aunt, disappearing without a trace. Now imagine the world just forgetting about them. This is what's happening to so many Indigenous women in California and across the United States. Their stories are being lost and their voices being silenced. Today, I want to talk about why this is happening and, most importantly, how we can change it. Abigail Echo Hawk is a Native American leader said, until there is a cooperation and better tracking at all the government levels, we will never know the full truth. We have to do this for our mothers, daughters, sisters, and aunties. Today, I want to talk about with you the heartbreak of missing and murdered Indigenous women and how many of their stories are left untold and their families left without answers. I'll share why this is happening and why what we can do to help. Together, we can change their stories.
There's a crisis happening right now, and too many people don't even know about it. Indigenous women are disappearing, and no one seems to care or notice. They are more likely to be hurt or killed, and their cases go often unsolved. How many women have to go missing before we stand up and say enough is enough? In 2016, a woman named Sherry Papini made up a story about being kidnapped, and that story caused a lot of pain. People became scared of certain groups of people, even though they had nothing to do with her disappearance. But Indigenous women with stories are real and heartbreaking, are not always believed, and their pain isn't given the attention it deserves. Take the case of Nikki McCain. She went missing in May of 2024, and for months her family had no answers. They found her truck, but Nikki was still gone. Her family hasn't stopped fighting for justice, but the truth is, too many Indigenous families are left in the dark, wondering where their loved ones are and if anyone will care enough to find them. Before we get into how we are going to take action on this problem, we would like to highlight a special achievement. An article by News from Native California recognizes the tremendous achievement made by NASA astronaut Nicole Inupa Mann, a member of the Wailaki of the Round Valley Indian tribe in Northern California, who made history as the first Indigenous woman in space. Mann is the spacecraft commander for NASA's SpaceX Crew 5 mission on the International Space Station, where she worked for 5 months, returning to Earth back in March of 2023. Taking action. News from Native California also reported on a women's march held in San Francisco, in which Indigenous women and their allies have united on behalf of missing and murdered women. The movement aimed to empower everyone to fight for their rights, civil liberties, and social justice, as well as fighting for the inclusion of Indigenous people in decisions that affect them and their communities. At the MMIP Summit and Day of Action, tribal leaders from across California, along with state and federal legislators and leaders, including California Assemblymember James Ramos, California Attorney General Ron Bonta, and U.S. Senator Alex Padilla, as well as law enforcement and families contending with unsolved murder cases, met back in February in Sacramento, advocating for solutions that target the crisis's root causes. The Native Hope organization brings awareness to the missing and murdered Indigenous women all across the United States, as well as noting specific dates and events that contribute to spreading awareness. One of the most being May 5th, the United States National Day of Awareness for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. The UCSC American Indian Resource Center is dedicated to raising awareness about missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. They host events where they provide presentations on the matter for students, organizations, departments, programs, and on the UCSC campus and the Santa Cruz community who are interested in learning more. The presentation covers information about missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls' history, issues of jurisdiction, the legislation, advocacy, and provides audiences with resources on what they can do to help spread awareness and take action.
We can't ignore this anymore. We need to understand why this is happening. So let's talk about the reasons behind this silence.
The first main point, the wounds of history. For centuries, Native American people have been treated unfairly. Throughout the years, there has been many incidents that have left them with less than others, which reflects a long legacy of poor treatment and unfair systems. The government took children away from their families and forced them into schools that tried to erase their culture. This left deep wounds that have never fully healed. These wounds are still felt today by families who are continuing to struggle because their pain is ignored. This ties into the problem we are talking about today, missing Indigenous women in California or even around the world. There are always missing women, but the higher percentage being Indigenous women. Most of the time, their cases get left unsolved or even unanswered, leaving no justice for the victim or the families. In the article, if they do not fulfill what they have promised, I will accuse them, locating Indigenous women and their influence in the California missions. The readers gather an idea of just how many traumatizing experiences the Indigenous women go through. It mentions two women's stories interfering with issues like rape and sexual violence. In the article, Unseen Missing Murdered Indigenous Women in California, Part of Nationwide Crisis, the author mentions that 84% of Indigenous women living on reservations experience some sort of violence and are 10 times more likely to be murdered, while 40% of victims exploited in sex trafficking operations are Indigenous. This is extremely high percentages, off, especially when a large amount of these stories are ending with no answers. Also, in the article, Restoring the Power of a Free Mind and Body and the Violence Against Women, the author describes more than 5,700 missing Indigenous females have been reported nationwide, but only 116 were logged into the federal missing persons database. Due to this, there needs to be a change. There's a law from a long time ago that makes it harder for Native American communities to protect themselves. It says that local police, not Native police, have to handle crimes on their land. But the problem is they don't have enough resources to do this right. This is what makes it harder to solve cases, and many go cold like Nikki's. We need to fix this system. With the large amount of women going missing, they are often met with poor investigation or lack of effort to find answers. The ongoing neglect is starting to become more and more obvious, and a change is needed to be made. Acknowledging past wrongs, supporting these tribes and their cultures, and ensuring that their voices are heard is the first steps to bettering our system in today's society. In another article, Persuasive Failure to Investigate, report finds lack of scrutiny in cases of missing and murdered Indigenous women. The statewide clearance rate is more than 60% in the past decade, according to the State Department of Justice, meaning that murders of Indigenous women in Northern California were about 7 times less likely to be solved than homicides, including all other victims. This is the perfect example of how unfair our system is revolving around this upsetting issue. Lastly, in the article California's Forgotten Missing Indigenous Women, it gives us insight on many different victim stories and the unanswered questions about their disappearances. Mentioning names such as Emily Risling and Rachel Sloan, both part of the tribes and the killers, have yet to be found. Link to Nikki McCain. Nikki's case is a painful reminder that the system is failing Indigenous women. When her story initially was announced to the city, it was a big deal, but only for a short amount of time. It became a forgotten story and answers weren't available or given. She could be home with her family right now if things were different. If we gave tribes more power to protect their people, things might have turned out way differently.
So, what can we do to change this? How can we help these families and find answers and stop this crisis from continuing? One of the most important things we can do to make sure we're keeping track of every single case of the missing women or hurt women, the Urban Indian Health Institute, UIHI, is working hard to collect data, but right now we don't have enough information. Without this information, it's impossible to understand the full scale of the problem and stop it. We need to give Native American tribes more control over their land, over their people, and over their safety. If they had more people to handle their own cases, they could bring more justice to the communities, and the families of missing women like Nikki McCain deserve to have their voices heard, and they deserve the help they need to get the answers. Link to Nikki McCain. Nikki McCain's family is still fighting for answers, and we can help by supporting organizations that are trying to solve cases like hers. If we all join together, we can make sure no one is forgotten. Today, we've learned that Indigenous women are disappearing and their stories are not always told. We've seen why this happens because of a long history of pain and the system that doesn't support them. We've also talked about how we can help by making sure there's better tracking of cases and by giving Native tribes more power to protect their own. Call to action. We all have a role to play in making sure these women are heard. Share their stories, support the organizations that are working hard to bring justice, tell people that this is a real problem and it's time to act. The more we stand together, the more we can help bring these women home. These women are not just statistics, they are our friends, daughters, sisters, and our mothers. We cannot let them be forgotten. Together, we can fight for them and we can make sure their voices are heard. So let's bring an end to this silence and give these families the justice they deserve. Thank you.